Marry me."
After dating for a year, he gave me a ring. I was head over heels for him, and we were dating with marriage in mind. We both wanted 2 kids, ideally a boy and a girl. He had always said we would split the chores and parenting duties, so I accepted his proposal without any concern. My name is Lily. I'm a 26-year-old office worker, leading an ordinary life, but my life changed about a year and a half ago. I fell in love at first sight with a man named Brian at a business dinner. With the help of my friends, I managed to get close to him and approached him relentlessly. Within 6 months, we started dating, and a year later, we were married.
I'm so happy to be married to Lily. Living with the person you love is so much fun.
I fell for him first, but Brian truly loves me. We lived together and split chores, as we had discussed when we were dating. But then, one day, things started to change. Half a year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant.
"I need to step up my game as a father."
Brian said this and started working overtime more than before. However, I had severe morning sickness and I could hardly get out of bed. I felt lonely and wished he could come home early to stay with me. But I couldn't say this to Brian, who was working so hard, and the days passed until I entered my 2nd trimester. Perhaps Brian was trying to earn money for our child. As if forgetting our promise before marriage, he even stopped helping with chores, perhaps thinking I had time since I was at home. I would have liked to go home to my parents for delivery, but they had passed away. My in-laws live nearby, but I hardly know them and can't rely on them. I felt very lonely, and then came the due date. Before I knew it, our son was a month old. Then, unusually, Brian came home early and flopped down on the sofa.
"I'm exhausted. What's for dinner?"
"I'm sorry, I was just about to start."
"Why?"
Our son's nightly crying was intense, so I couldn't get a good night's sleep. I was overwhelmed with housework and childcare during the day. I wish he'd told me he was coming home early. Swallowing those words, I went into the kitchen.
"My parents are planning to throw a baby shower this Sunday."
Come to think of it, they had mentioned that when they visited us the other day.
"Should we get something delivered? I'm thinking sushi would be great. My parents are coming over after all, so let's splurge a bit and treat them."
"What? Okay, got it." Though I agreed, a week passed by at the speed of light, tending to my baby and household chores. I couldn't even get time to order sushi. Sunday arrived, and just as I tried to order sushi, the store wasn't open yet, so I couldn't place an order. Then finally Brian woke up. I asked him to place an order instead, but he said he had to go to work and left. At the end, from being occupied with my son, I didn't even get to order sushi, let alone have breakfast, and noon passed. But I thought if I explained the situation, my father-in-law and mother-in-law would understand. Cradling my crying son, just when I felt like I was about to cry too, my in-laws arrived. They came much earlier than I had expected. I wonder why. Upon entering, my mother-in-law immediately picked up my son. "Has he been crying all this time? Brian used to cry a lot when he was born, too." My father-in-law walked in holding a big bag. He proudly took out its contents and said,
"What do you think? Hors d'oeuvres. We had reserved it, but figured it might not be enough, so we went ahead and added some extra touch this morning."
"His meddling is why it took longer than expected, but he was determined to have you taste it." My mother-in-law said with a laugh. I confessed that I intended to order sushi but ran out of time.
"Never mind all that. You're tired. Don't worry about such unnecessary things. Get some rest. All right, let's make some rice balls."
My father-in-law rolled up his sleeves, only to realize there was hardly any rice left, so he quickly rushed out to buy some more. My mother-in-law suggested that I rest while she took my crying son for a walk. Grateful, I lay down on the couch. After a while, I was awakened by the sound of the front door opening.
"Lily, what are you doing?"
It was Brian who entered.
"You said my parents were coming over, right? What about the preparations?"
Still groggy from sleep, I faced an intensely questioning Brian. He then noticed the hors d'oeuvres my in-laws had brought.
So this is all you prepared for today? Can't be. You ordered sushi, right?
I couldn't order sushi. But before I could finish, Brian suddenly erupted in anger.
What? They came all the way here and you got them this cheap junk?
Huh? Junk? What's he talking about? Overwhelmed by Brian's outburst, I was at a loss for words. Brian then knocked the plate with the hors d'oeuvres off the table. Just as I stood there in shock, my in-laws returned.
What was that noise? Is everything all right?
My father-in-law had just returned with a bag of rice, and my mother-in-law, who'd been pacifying our son, were taken aback by the sight. The next instant, my father-in-law was furious.
Brian, what the hell is going on?
To which Brian replied, without a shred of guilt.
It's simple. I can't serve this cheap stuff to you guys. When you both came all the way here.
No, that's not right, Brian. Caught by surprise, I struggled to articulate my thoughts when my father-in-law and Brian began to argue.
You've left everything to Lily. If you think it's cheap, you should have prepared it yourself. What the hell? You said you were coming for a baby shower, so I told her to get some sushi. After all, she's always home. She should be able to do that, right? Just the other day, there was no dinner ready when I got home. And today, this cheap stuff? What the hell?
Brian's words made my blood rush to my head. My father-in-law brought it.
What?
Stunned, Brian stood frozen as I let out all my pent-up frustration. My father-in-law went out of his way to reserve and get it. Also, these ones here were made by my father-in-law and mother-in-law. How can you be so cruel?
No, that can't be. I didn't know.
Even if you didn't know, I never thought you were the type to treat food this way. It's just despicable. Brian paled considerably. And just because I'm always home doesn't mean you don't have to do anything. I've been struggling home all alone. I'm holding the baby and need to stay alert 24 hours. Have you done anything to help me?
Well, I hold the baby. I comfort her.
You only comfort the baby when she's in a good mood. You've never held her when she cries, have you? Whenever she starts crying, you hand her over to me, and when she cries at night, you leave the room because you can't sleep. Everything I'd been thinking since the baby was born came spilling out. I couldn't stop myself. Do you think I'm resting just because I'm home when you're here, Brian? Do you think I'm just sleeping all day with the baby? I'm not in perfect health, and I'm lucky if I can get 2 hours of sleep. You say you have to go to work, but I can never catch a break from parenting. Why do I have to take care of you in the midst of that? Tears streaming down my face, I continued to berate Brian. My father-in-law became even angrier and rebuked Brian.
You've been living like this? I told you to take better care of Lily.
After my mother-in-law put her son to bed, she comforted me and joined my father-in-law in his criticism. That's right. Postpartum life is physically and mentally challenging. Even before Lily gave birth, you were hardly home, Brian. At this, Brian finally managed to find his voice, though he stumbled over his words.
I can't help it. I had work. I thought I needed to earn more, since I was going to become a father. But what if Lily gets sick? What the hell, you two? Always Lily, Lily. You're just worried about Lily because you're happy about the baby. You hardly know her.
Brian grumbled sullenly. Indeed, we did not have a wedding, and I had hardly interacted with my in-laws. My parents died in an accident before I married Brian, so we had our wedding ceremony overseas, just the two of us. The only proper meeting we'd had with my in-laws was when we greeted them to receive their blessings. My in-laws lived about a 30-minute drive away, but even when we visited occasionally, I only followed Brian, and we hardly had any substantial conversation. When I found out I was pregnant, it seemed like my in-laws were willing to help out, but they felt like strangers, and I doubted we'd get along well. However, this changed when I was about 2 months away from giving birth. Lily, how are you feeling? Do you mind if your father-in-law and I come over? I was surprised when I received a phone call out of the blue from my mother-in-law, but I had no reason to decline. So I said we were waiting for them and started cleaning up while cradling my swollen belly. Before long, the doorbell rang. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were already here. What's going on? Hello, we thought you'd start cleaning if we told you we were coming, so we called when we were close by. Are you about to have lunch? Would you like to join us? My mother-in-law, a brisk woman, had always intimidated me a bit, but her thoughtfulness nearly brought me to tears.
Lily, sit down. We'll take care of the rest,
said my father-in-law. Started tidying up along with my mother-in-law. Honestly, I was in pain and didn't feel like moving or cleaning because my belly was heavy. I was planning to just have a quick lunch today. Moreover, since I started my maternity leave, I had very few conversations with people, which stressed me out, so I was very pleased with their visit. It seems like my in-laws were worried about me, but they had refrained from contacting me so as not to inconvenience me. However, they got worried when they didn't hear from Brian and learned from my father-in-law that he had been working overtime and coming into work on his days off and was just sleeping when he was home, so they decided to rush over today. I was so happy that I decided to tell Brian about it and waited for him to come home. He didn't come home until after 11 p.m. As soon as Brian noticed I was awake, he rushed over.
What are you doing? Why aren't you sleeping?
I was just trying to tell him about the visit from his parents, so why was he so angry? I couldn't help but wonder if he had something to hide. All I could say was sorry, and I crawled into bed crying. Even after that, my in-laws kept coming over to help regularly, but I never had the opportunity to tell Brian. I thought either my father-in-law or mother-in-law must have told Brian, but it turned out that everyone thought the same, and no one had actually told Brian. And he just found out today that I was getting along with his parents. Seeing this, Brian made a pitiful face.
I can't believe it. I'm Lily's husband and their real son. Why am I the only one being left out?
I had calmed down once, but his words made me feel irritated again. Left out? I tried to tell you so many times. There were times when I waited for you to come home to tell you, but whenever you saw me awake, you got mad, asking why I was awake. Are you sure you're not hiding anything? I ended up saying what I had intended not to. I had been concerned about it since that day. My father-in-law and mother-in-law seemed to anticipate the worst situation, but Brian firmly denies it.
No, that's not it. I swear that's not it.
How can you say that? You don't have any proof, do you?
There's no hard evidence, but it was because I was worried about Lily's health. It was late at night, and there were times when she would wake up because of stomach pains, so I thought she should go to bed earlier.
Brian's words almost brought tears to my eyes, but I was more consumed by anger. So what was all that about you coming home early the other day, then acting all high and mighty about there being no dinner?
About that.
Then Brian awkwardly began to explain. Apparently, that day he made a mistake at work, was reprimanded by his boss, who advised him that he was working too much and should go home early, and that's why he finished work on time.
How could I tell Lily such an embarrassing story? That's why I took it out on her. I'm sorry.
I see. Brian was trying his best as a father after all. From that point, we finally got to have a heart-to-heart conversation. Even when our son cried, he said he thought it was better if I held him, because he would stop crying sooner. Hearing this, Brian started crying.
I was under pressure to be a more responsible father, and that, unlike mothers, I thought I had to toughen up and not spoil my child as a father.
His words were disjointed, but I knew Brian was trying his best as a father. It was nerve-wracking going through our first childbirth, and it must have been the same for Brian. Brian crying like a child. Seeing him like this, I couldn't help but start crying as well. Suddenly, from the next room, we could hear our son crying. My father-in-law and mother-in-law picked up our son and started soothing him, all while starting to laugh.
What a family. This is entertaining.
Like father, like son, huh? Let's see who stops crying first. In the end, our son was the first one to stop crying. After this incident, it seems Brian had a change of heart and began to balance his work and family life. At one point, I even contemplated divorce, but I am content with how things are now. Brian's ideal father was a stern, silent breadwinner, but that was so out of character for him. I don't know why he held such an ideal. He realized it himself, and it has become a dark chapter in his history. If anyone brings up the subject, he blushes and runs away. Now he is more tender to our son, and even helps out when he wakes up crying at night. We are expecting a daughter next, and Brian and I are looking forward to it.